Guidestones are the implementation of the new age beginning. And the BRICS currency is coming in with all the new gold-backed currency and commodities-backed currency. Well, the last thing to do would remove the financial center completely. So it would have to move somewhere else, and that would be such a stark signal. And without a doubt, everybody would know that era had ended at this point of on the planet being the financial capital of the world is no longer.
And I think it's fascinating how much stuff is going on around the world right now. It seems like something has turned on the overdrive button, I guess is one way to put it. And I just want to give a few examples and I want to hear your thoughts. But CERN does this huge experiment. It was either on the 4th or the 5th of this month of July. Then they come out and say they found another particle. They actually say they use the number 3, which is interesting, 3 particles. And 10 years ago, they did the same thing. They turned up the collider. They found some new particle and they said, hey, look what we found. What's fascinating to me is the timelines. Are they using these specific dates because of the alignments of the planets and the stars? And are they able to bring in consciousness? Is it actually a stargate, or are they just collapsing particles? And if they are just collapsing particles, in doing so, are they creating new dimensions that we somehow become a part of? But then to go further, they do this experiment. The next day, somebody goes and blows up the Guidestones. Later that day, they take all the Guidestones down for safety reasons. And then they go on to say that they looked for the time capsule and they weren't able to find it. Interesting. Maybe it's true.
I heard they found it.
What if they did? And
they did.
Well, okay, so we'll talk about that in just a second. And then Boris resigns. Sri Lanka gets taken over by the people again. And then you've got what happened in Japan. And this all happens either close to immediately after or within hours or days of the CERN activation. So did they bring in a new consciousness or a new civilization that says, okay, we'll take over from here, or something completely different? Because I know that's way sci-fi when we get into that kind of stuff, but that's just—
No, it's not.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Well, if you look at what was happening, today's the last day of something significant in the stars, as you were talking about. In the zodiac signs, the planets all reside in the house of rulership. And it's not a normal event where all the planets are in their own zodiac signs except for the sun. Now, what was supposed to come out of this was if you were starting new projects or new adventures or whatever it is, ventures, you need to start on the 3rd, and then it ends pretty much today. But whatever you put into motion right now was supposed to have the most epic outcome of pretty much literally almost no failure rate if you were to start your projects right now moving forward. Hence, I started all the new Patreon. I rebranded my channel. I rebranded the entire Adapt 2030 sphere of information around climate, food, and economy, because that's where we go. So it encompasses all those, and then moving to try to go to more interactive with, live calls on things inside the Patreon. So I'm trying to really revamp that. And that was my whole thing, because I learned about this cycle, which is so rare, where all these planets and then all these things that you're talking about occur at the exact same time. So if I was aware of it, watching some astrologers and their channels explaining how fortuitous this event is in terms of century-long events here to come in, where these possibilities to make things happen faster and get almost guaranteed results. And then all the what you're talking about happens. And then you need to add in another, at least 15 countries that I have seen that have gone into food riots. Sri Lanka is a great example. That was a full overrun of the palace and everything. But if you go across the planet from Albania to Argentina, there's so many other places that this is happening. Also Kenya, and nations. If you look in Africa, Kenya is rather well-to-do, and then Nigeria as well. And everywhere you're looking at is having problems with food availability and pricing, where it's overturning governments at the moment, and then all those other secondary and tertiary things you just spoke of. So well, what's first, the chicken or the egg on that? Excuse the chainsaw in the background. We're trying to cut a few trees down. We're fencing in the entire front part of the property where the orchard is. So if you hear banging, we're putting in some T-posts along with the 4x4 posts that we concreted in. And then we need to remove a couple tree roots and stuff. So we're trying to get that fence wire tied. It's 4x4 wrapped wire fence.
I can't even hear it. So I got our neighbor's lawn. Maybe that's it, but it sounds fine. And so you brought up some very interesting information about the alignment of the planets. That's fascinating. So how many more days do we have to implement something with an additional boost of manifestation?
It ends today on the 12th.
Today. Okay.
So you could have rocked it from the 3rd all the way through the 12th. So for me, we went up to see Joel Salatin's farm up in Virginia and start to implement that because he has a rotational agriculture where they send cow into the pasture first. And as the cow leave all their, poo laying around, they let it go for 3 or 4 days until it starts to decompose and get worms and flies in there. And then they rotate chickens through so they can eat, scratch, and fluff and introduce that medium into the field. And then they move those along, and then they either do turkey or chicken in a rotational basis. And they have some of the most incredible fields I've ever seen. When you look at verdant green fields, I'm like, whoa, it's stunning. Electric green coming off there. And then all their animals are so healthy because it's a regenerative practice. So we went up there to learn to try to implement that here with what we're doing. And, we were starting that to bring all that information flow in right here on the 3rd of the month, coming into the 12th here on how to restructure at least the Adapt 2030 channel, because things are changing so fast. Talking about the grand solar minimum was cool. A lot of people understood the changes in the cycles, but what's the immediacy of how it affects you and your bank account right now? I mean, that was then, this is now. 2019 is never coming back again. So as we move forward, talking about all these things in the skies and petroglyphs that we're going to see coming with plasma displays in 2024, some people get it. But what happens with the average family on the street that needs to understand what's going to happen with their food costs, how the governments are going to react, and then what the supply chain is going to do from this month through the end of the year and then through 2023 with the garden tool shortages and the full spooky awareness and terror across the planet that we don't have enough food and everybody's going to grow their own food, needs to. And when they run to the stores, there's going to be nothing. There won't even be seeds. Pertinent information to make you help you make better informed decisions like on the spot right now that are going to affect you, not waiting way out in the future, but seeing what could be out there as an outlook further into the future. But the immediacy of this second, and that's kind of where the rebranding is going, is how timely information now to help you make better informed decisions. That's it. Welcome to the new channel.
I mean, you just offer so much information, and I wanted to know more about the food situation. Like you brought up the grains before, and you've also brought up the
fertilizer shortages.
Yeah, fertilizer shortages. So
we're going into pesticide and herbicide shortages right now, which is going to add on top of the fertilizer shortage. I hate to cut you off. Sorry, Rex. Go ahead. My bad.
No, you didn't cut me off, brother. I was done. Fertilizer.
You're so kind. All right. So, how many months ago was it you and I were talking about, like 8 months ago or so? And I was saying fertilizer shortages are coming. It was a 20% reduction in global fertilizer. And just the simple math, if you want to do at-home math together, let's add and subtract. A 1% non-application on your plants or on your species of corn, wheat, soybean, whatever, is going to reduce your yield by 1%. So we're at a 20% global reduction in fertilizer. So do the math. That's 20% reduction in global agricultural output. Then we got the extremes in the climate. But the next thing I was talking about is when they're doing the crop tours right now, we're going to run into the pesticide and herbicide shortages. Right now, we need to protect our plants. The whole debacle with diesel prices and supply chain breakdowns and not enough farm implements going in and farm inputs, super high record pricing and fertilizer shortages. That was the planting season. Now we got to protect our plants season. And there's not enough herbicides or pesticides out there to protect our plants. So now we got like weevils and grubs and worms and all kind of slugs and everything ripping through the fields and grasshoppers. But you got all these extra plants growing in between the rows. So when you throw down that very expensive fertilizer, other plants are nibbling it up too. Like, hey, thanks for the free fertilizer. Cool. We're going to grow bigger too. Usually they could knock all that stuff out and there would be just a single species in a field. But now, I don't, and how are the combines going to work through some of this stuff? Because they are tooled to harvest a one monocrop specific plant species. Now you're going to have ironweed mixed in with that stuff. Come on. And this is where we're coming into huge reductions because of non-fertilizer, or the fertilizer, now herbicide, now pesticides. Crop tours are coming. They're talking about dismal, whatever they're seeing out there now. They're already trying to cover it, sort of, but they're letting the messaging out. Dismal everywhere they're looking. Percentages down, 60% emergence on fields, nothing really out west in Kansas. They're like at places where going to be zero yields. And that's in the United States. Heaven forbid what they're talking about in Ukraine. It's going to get nasty, nasty. Now, who's ready for this? Because when we come in, and I'll leave it there, Rex, I'll let you respond. But then I wanted to talk about the price spikes that are going to occur in September. And then, how that's going to move society too. But back to the Guidestones, there's some important things happening there with, it seemed like it was a starting gun for me. Knowing what I know about the crop losses, we're going to move with hyperinflation in food and then civil unrest because of food pricing and inavailability. It seemed like all those Guidestones that were there were the implementation of this is the plan. And then boom, erased. And now it's the go. Started off, and it seems like that was the catalyst. And I want to, and let me ask you something. You understand Wicca and magic a little more than I do. I don't really delve into that, but I know some people who do. And an interesting point came up talking about the Guidestones when I had some people here this weekend helping with the fence. They were saying that, now you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm asking for information here. When you're casting a spell, generally the thing you're putting your energy into, you need to destroy it, either burn it or crush it or do something with it to make it go off into the ether. That's exactly what they did. So this girl that was explaining was like, that spell was in the stones, and by destroying the stones, they completed the spell casting. And again, it overlapped directly with, that's a starting gun into a new era to implement all those policies. So I would say there's going to be a ramp up in everything of all those 10 points. It's going to be go time, and you're going to see nonstop from this point forward, like serious exponential jumps in implementation of every single corrupt politician or parasite that's in there that's trying to move these agendas, go with full force, steamroller style. So throw that to me. You know more about the magic than I do.
Well, I've been studying magic now for about 20 years. And when I say magic, different forms of magic, mind over matter, hermetics, alchemy. I didn't get much into ritualistic magic. I studied a bit of chaos magic, and I've read a lot of the older esoteric stuff. And I've been able to connect a lot of magic to astrotheology. But really, if you think about it, for those that hear the term magic and they immediately think, oh man, you worship the devil. Oh man. First of all, if you think, if you're alive, that's magic. If you think something that influences something else, that's magic. So calm down about the whole devil thing. If you don't study magic and if you have a specific religious belief, take a step back and relax and realize it's the power of intention. Your power of intention by leaving me a comment saying that I'm a devil worshiper because I've studied magic, you yourself have done a form of magic. So it's about intention. And I see the world as an opportunity. I see people that want to make the world a better place. I see people that want to be better. And that's where I use some of my magic, is to give people the keys to unlock their true potential so that they can be the change they want to see, so that they can co-create in this universe and they can do what they want to do. So it's when I see these giant government bodies controlling people's minds and controlling their souls, it's not just about mind control anymore. It's about soul control. They want to control your soul. And they've probably figured out ways to get you on this reincarnation cycle so they can keep you in maybe not perpetuity, but for very long periods of time. And you're going through these cycles again and again and again and again, and you're building up their empire. So what you brought up about the Guidestones are that is a focal point of energy. They have, not only the people that put up the Guidestones, but all the people that know about the Guidestones. Whether you think it's satanic or not, you're putting some type of energy into those Guidestones. Now, when I read the first guide or the first inscription, it says, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. So that's going to freak a lot of people out because there's over 7 billion people on the earth. And they're going to be like, well, what about the other 6.5 billion people? Where do they go? So one person might look at that line and say, oh, that's the elite saying they're going to create an environment that brings the population down to 500 million people. When I look at this as, oh, okay, maybe that's where they want humanity to be after a major cataclysmic event, whether it's cyclical with a solar flare, whether it's an incoming asteroid or comet. I mean, Yellowstone erupting, major volcanoes. There's a lot of possibilities that could be linked to bringing the population down that would have nothing to do with artificial means. But that doesn't mean I'm right either. It could be them saying, well, we're going to make environment and we're going to bring the population down to 500 million people. And when you look at a lot of the agendas that are pushed by the powers that be, it seems like they certainly want a reduction in population. And so if you create a focal point and you put it in a location that's already highly charged based upon the ley lines and the Earth's magnetic fields and where it's actually positioned in the universe on the planet, it's filling this energy up. It's going into people's minds, and you're going to have this division where one person's going to think it's satanic and another person's going to think it's beautiful because it's somebody's way of saying they want to keep the earth in balance with nature, and the earth itself is a living being. It's a living species. These guide stones are a focal point of energy, like magic. People are putting energy into the guide stones, and the guide stones are reflecting energy back, especially considering that it's made out of granite and the way that they positioned it. It is a focal point of magic, of energy. And if you make a sigil, then you write a sigil, you put your intents into that sigil, and then if you burn it and you forget about what it means, then there's a much better chance that it will manifest in your life based upon a lot of the magical practices that I've been taught, because you don't have you're not putting barriers up with your mind to stop it. You completely forget about what you put into that symbol, and then you let it out into the universe, and then it takes its course. So now we've got these guide stones that were erected, and people for many years thought that they were satanic or evil or the opposite, like I said. But let's look at if this was blown up for a magical ritual to bring in the guide stones, to bring in these rules. The first one, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Who's going to be the 500 million? Who decides? Where do the other 6.5 billion go? Is it going to be a natural cycle? And then when people come out of the caves, they're going to be like, oh, look, 500 million. We must keep it under 500 million, Bob. Don't be banging Betsy too many times, okay? Because you can only have one child. It says so right here on these guide stones. Well, I don't know, man. I think that sounds kind of silly, right? Like, think about it. Major cataclysm. People have to go hide in caves, and then they come out, and are they even going to be able to read it? Well, can they read Latin? Can they read Arabic? Can they read English? I mean, where are they going to be in that point of time? So what you brought up a moment ago, I found very interesting, because you've got this focal point. You destroy that focal point and you bring that into the ether. Well, what do the guide stones say? What does number 2 say? Let's look at number 2, because we've read number 1. Everybody knows number 1. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Okay, well, you could look at that and you could say, oh, that makes sense, right? Because for a lot of people, it's easier for them to go out and buy it's easier for them to have a baby than to go out and buy groceries. I mean, it's very easy to have children. So I could see I think it'd be great if people could reproduce wisely. But you know what? Does that ever happen? I mean, how many kids do you have that you're like, oops, right? I mean, I wouldn't take any of my kids back and say, oh, I should have done that wiser. I mean, I'm so lucky, right? We're so blessed to have children. So, that to me seems it's very cold. It's very cold, because in reality, if you've got a family, most people don't plan on having kids. They just, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but unite humanity with a new language, with a living new language. So what would that living language actually be? Artificial intelligence?
Mathematics.
Mathematics. Absolutely. So that could be cool, right? I mean, that could actually be a benefit, but also what about other languages and what about other communications? Is this the only, do we all have to be united in this? This to me sounds like connecting everybody with the machine and having a new living language connected into your head so that you can communicate with everybody else so that they know what you're thinking, so that they know if you might be a threat to their move. Now, number 4, rule passion.
I would take AI, and that comes back to blockchain and all these different things. Why is all of a sudden all these different technology has been rolled out exactly at this juncture in time? Like, we really had the tech to do blockchain back in, let's say, the year 2000. Why did it wait until, another 12 or 15 years before it came on the scene? It's almost like some of these things are pulled back until the implementation time. About the universal language, as I've been seeing, if you were going to speak to another species off planet in a different star system, the way you'd probably communicate would be through mathematics, because it's the purest form of language that is universal, at least in the third dimension. We're not talking quantum physics here. We're just talking numerals and what exists inside. Once you come off that base layer, there's laws of physics and mathematics. It would be the way to communicate. It's the same anywhere.
When I was growing up as a little kid, and I've thought about this for years, I thought to myself, a galactic enterprise, a group, an organization, that has a council of peoples that are a part of it. But in order to get to this council, this galactic council, your planet has to be united. And we've talked actually about this before also. And what's really interesting? The Billy Meyer stories, like, I'm very skeptical about Billy Meyer, but as I told you off air a few days ago, about a week or so ago, before anything happened to the Guidestones even, we did a podcast discussing, I was with Micah Dank, and he does a lot of stuff on astrotheology. And he said, Rex, I've got this gospel that I want to decode with you. And it's called the Gospel of Emmanuel, but it's spelled with a J. And it was a Gnostic scripture that was discovered in the 60s that rewrites a lot of the other scriptures. And I thought to myself, oh, that's interesting. And he came on the show, and in his presentation, he said, Rex, you want to know where the 500 million came from? Look at this. And he said this, and in the scripture, it talks about keeping people, the population, under 500 million. And I thought to myself, oh, I wonder if that's where they came up with the Guidestones. But when you follow this scripture and you realize that it was discovered by Billy Meyer, of all people, and then you connect, then you have all those photographs and all that information where Billy Meyer was making contacts with extraterrestrials and taking photo shoots with them in front of his house.
Selfie.
It's weird, dude. It's weird. All these things are starting to connect. What if whether or not that scripture is legit or not, whether Billy Meyer's legit or not, what if they're using all of this as a psychological conditioning formula for those that do believe they are aliens that came down and took selfies with them? And then he finds this scripture that says keep balance of population on the earth, 500 million or less. And then you find out about the numerology associated with where the Guidestones were put. And then the time of destruction. Time of destruction, which when you and I did the videos, we looked at the 333, right? Which is weird. Well, what makes it even more interesting, it was 403.33, which equals 13, which is a very powerful number in numerology. And I have to double check this, but a lot of people were commenting that it exploded the same day as Junior's birthday.
Now, wait a second. 7/6 is also a 13, so it was July 6th. So that'd be the 13th.
Interesting.
And then if you take the 4, or if you had the 7, and then the 4 o'clock you're talking about, 7 minus 4 is also 3. So there's many ways that 3 came up with 13s and different esoteric numbers in there. It was really spooky when I looked at that. I just got a little freaked for a minute. I was like, oh, that was a mark in time, like, for sure. That was definitely a starting gun approved, because, you go through the news and you see like 33 cars were destroyed or 33 buildings collapsed. There's numbers always in news releases. If you see those numbers in news releases.
You're so right. And what about the collider finding 3 new particles?
Yeah, right.
So there's going to be those out there. But here's another thing that's interesting, right? How many times have you done a podcast or something that's happened very significant to you, and you looked at the time and it was hardcore numerology, like 3:30,
11:11 or something like this.
Yeah, all the
Notice
time.
the clock at 11:11.
Right, right. And so, you know, Diamond and I were talking about this yesterday, and we asked the question. We were talking about the Guidestones. Was it something that was highly intricate from a like somebody that knew exactly what they were doing? Like, okay, at this time, at this date, I want you to go to this location and then do your thing. Or was it just somebody that got pissed off, and there are beings out there that can use people like drones, and so they're like tapping into that person, taking them over, possessing them, and that person does that at that specific time, not necessarily wanting to do it at that specific time, but because of the higher powers, these higher level beings that don't necessarily need to come into physical form, they can influence people through their minds. Which is it?
That's super precise within a 1 second variant of doing that.
0.33?
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. That's within a 1 second window of that happening on the same day. And then if you look at 2022, then you got the repeating twos. So it's 222, 333, 1313. Yeah. Oh, come on now. That's a little, can't be just coincidental, right? And then the whole thing about the, what do you say, the time capsule to be opened on, and there was no date. Now it might have been a spoof article, but they did say that they opened the time capsule and they found a copy of Playboy from 1980 and 1,700 lewds in the time capsule.
What's that?
And some weird sticker of some kind of meme sticker from the from the year 1980.
What did you call it though?
Say again?
You 1,700 what?
Lewds. Ludes.
What's that?
It was a substance back in the 70s that was supposed to help you make sleep. And if you ever watched The Wolf of Wall Street, when they would pop those things, and if you could stay up past just when you're going to fall asleep, you would just you get super buzzed after that. So they stopped manufacturing them shortly after that. This whole event is just bizarre. None of it makes sense. And the way it was torn down and like, safety precaution and everything hauled away within seconds.